It's one of those days. You know, a lesser church would let this get them down and it would completely derail everything, but we're better than that. My name is Kyle Sommerfeld. Most weeks you will find me right over there working with the kids of this church. I love hanging out with the kids of this church. I love teaching them about Jesus. And back there every week we talk about Jesus. We talk about how much he loves the kids. We talk about how much he wants to change the world with your kids. And that's a really, really exciting and very serious thing. But we also goof off and have a really good time. We play games back there a lot. So I thought the best and most appropriate way for me to kick off my message this week is to play a little bit of a game. It's a game that some of you may have played before called Apples to Apples. Who's familiar with Apples to Apples? All right, a good number of people. I need 3 volunteers to play a single round of Apples to Apples with me. And you won't have to get on stage. I'm going to have you be down here so you don't have to look at anybody except for me. Here's one. I got one. Can I get 2 more volunteers to play 1 round of Apples to Apples? Right back there. Alex is coming up. All right, and number 3, Steven. Steven's going to come back up. All right, this is perfect. All right, I'm going to explain the rules to you for the people in here who don't know how this works. I'm going to hand a stack of red cards to this group, and each of you are going to take 7 cards. You're going to take 7 cards. How this works is the red cards have people, places, and things on them. They might have Abraham Lincoln. They might have New York City. They might have pizza on there. It could be anything, okay? They're going to have 7 cards. Each one's going to say a different thing. I have the green deck, and the green deck has describing words. It's got adjectives on it. So I might get powerful. And then like Abe Lincoln would be a good answer for that, but pizza might not be good. I guess it depends on the pizza. There's some powerful pizza out there. Maybe that's why I'm buying Andrew this week. So that's how this is going to work. I'm going to randomly pick a name, and the winner is going to get $20 in Kroger dollars. I almost did Applebee's, because it'd be apples to apples for Applebee's, but some people don't like Applebee's, so I chickened out. So that's what's on the line here. We're going to play a single round of this. Steven, I'm going to shuffle this. You tell me when to stop, and that's the one I'm going to do on top. Just say stop. Okay. All right. Here we go. The word that they are all competing for is squishy. Squishy. Which also they have little synonyms on here. Mushy, spongy, doughy. So each of these 3 people, they're going to hand me one of their red cards face down. Doughy's one of the words, so if they got pizza would be really, really good right here. So they're each going to hand me one face down for their answer. And I will judge the one that matches the best, and the winner will get the Kroger bucks, all right? Now, this is blind. I don't know which one of these 3 people gave me this one. Number 1 is baked beans. Baked beans, an undisputedly squishy object. Number 2 is the Dallas Cowboys, which is a very funny answer. And if you laughed, you know, 1, how funny that is about the Cowboys, but 2, how this game can get kind of screwy and funny. Number 3 is saliva, which is also undisputedly squishy, and also a great band from my childhood. So that's a nice little reminder there, too. So, the squishiest of these 3 is definitely baked beans, but when I play Apples to Apples, and you would only know this if you knew me really well, I always pick the one that made me laugh the most. So I'm going to go with Dallas Cowboys as the winner of this. That was you? All right, you win the Kroger's dollars. Give them a round of applause. All right, who was baked beans? You? It was? I knew it. That makes total sense. So here, I was expecting to get 3 strangers. You guys can return to your seats. We're all set. Thank you for playing. Appreciate it. Saliva was also a good answer. Steven, have you heard of the band Saliva before? Yeah, of course not. Of course not. So, this is the whole thing about Apples to Apples, and this is a lesson that we can all learn from this game. It's not about getting the best answer. It's about getting the answer that the judge is going to like the most. That's the key with all of Apples to Apples. Now, some people, if you're playing in a group, this is a game I play with my in-laws all the time. My wife is one of 3 girls, and their family loves board games, loves card games, so whenever I go on a trip with them or visit them, they're always playing something, and Apples to Apples is one of the favorites. And a really big key is that if you have an accurate answer, you don't actually want to waste it on someone who's going to give you, judge in a silly way, because that's a waste of a good card. You want to save the card for the occasion. You want to save the card for the person. And what I love about Apples to Apples teaches a lesson that I think is really, really important for us all to learn. And that's to ask a question every time you start a new venture. Every time you have a new goal, you have to ask yourself a question. That question is this: how am I being scored? How am I being scored? Now, of these 3 people, Alex actually knows me really, really well, so she probably had the best shot of knowing that I'm not going to pick the best answer most of the time. I'm going to pick kind of a silly one. That's usually going to be what I do. That's usually kind of my style. If one of them makes me laugh, that's probably the winner. If all 3 of them had known that coming up, they may have picked a different card, but they didn't really know that. And that's the trick, and that's the big thing about how am I being scored. That's the importance of asking that question. I really learned this lesson in college, because in high school, if you're good at one class, usually the skills translate to another class. Usually you're either just good at class or you're not. And so much of high school is making sure you're ready for standardized tests, so a lot of the education becomes very standardized. If my mom was in here, who's a former first grade teacher, she could do a whole sermon just on that. But when you get to college, the rules are different. The skills for one professor don't necessarily translate to another one. I had one teacher who said 75% of your grade is going to be how much you participate in discussion in this classroom. 75%. Homework, tests, everything else. That was a quarter of his grade. He wanted you to come in and talk. I had other professors who just wanted to stand up there and lecture the whole time. They got mad if you raised your hand and asked a question. They didn't want anything to do with that. And it was really, really important that if you applied the same strategy to one class that you did to the other, you were very unlikely to do well in both of those. So in college, I just kind of learned to ask the question, how am I being scored? How is this professor going to score me? What does this syllabus look like, and what is that telling me about what's important to this class? That's something I had learned really, really quickly, and what I've realized is that of all the actual applicable subject-oriented things I learned in college, the thing I think that I learned most in my years in college is that question of how am I being scored? Learning to figure out what's important when I'm trying to do a particular thing. About 6 months ago, I was studying for a certification, and when I was studying for that certification, I looked at the test, and the test said that it had 7 subjects, and 2 of them made up 70% of the questions. So which 2 subjects do you think I studied the most? I studied the 2 that made up most of the test. That kind of thing applies with everything. If you and another coworker are up for the same promotion, you might be the more qualified candidate. You might have more experience. You might know more about the position, but if the other guy knows how to give your boss what he's looking for, they're going to have an advantage over you because they know how they're being scored. And sometimes how you're scored is more important than even your aptitude on something. Baked beans was by far the best answer in that example, but it wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for something that made me laugh. And the Dallas Cowboys being squishy succeeded at that. So I want to talk about that today because I think that's a really important thing. I'm going to come back to that question, how am I being scored, several times today. And I want to start on it by just talking about the Apostle Paul. We're in the middle of this series about the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit can be found in Galatians chapter 5. There's this one verse where Paul basically writes this all-star game of virtues, all-star game of attributes that are basically the fruit of the Spirit, which are basically a way of saying if someone follows Jesus, these are the things that follow. So if a follower of Jesus is a tree, these are the fruit that they're expecting to grow from that tree. And let's look through that list really quick. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Paul is writing this, and I think in a lot of ways he's trying to help these brand new Christians in this church understand, here's how you're being scored. Now, this isn't like a pass-fail kind of thing. This is definitely not a you're saved because you do these things. That's not what's happening at all. But he wants to let them know the more you follow Jesus, the more these fruit are expected to grow. A Christian looks like this. A follower of Jesus looks like this. A follower of Jesus has these things result from them. Back then, a lot of the people reading this or hearing someone read this to them would have been farmers. They would have understood illustrations about the land, about trees. And in winter, it's hard to tell whether a tree is healthy or not, right? Because it's not growing anything. A dead tree looks like a healthy tree in winter. How do you know when a tree is good? Well, when you can see what's blossoming on that tree. And what Paul is saying is here are some of these things that are on that tree. Can we bring that verse up real quick again? I want to look at that list. All right, let's look at these again, because when Andrew told me I was going to be speaking on one of these, I looked at this list and I thought, a lot of these are things that the church values, but a lot of them are things that the world values a lot too. We appreciate people who are loving. We appreciate people. Forbearance is another word for patience. If someone's able to wait their turn, we admire that quite a bit. If someone's self-controlled, if someone isn't flying off the handle all the time, we admire that a lot. But I looked through this list, and there were a couple that I thought to myself, I'm not sure our world cares that much about some of these. And there were 2 in particular that I really kind of sat in my crosshairs a little bit, and I thought, I don't know that we really think that they're that important. And the 2 were gentleness and kindness. And they have a lot in common, and I'm not really going to talk about gentleness this week. What I really want to focus on is kindness. And the reason I picked it this week is because I'm not entirely sure it's something that we actually believe is good for us. We might say it, and I work with kids. Of course, we want our kids to be kind. We tell them that kindness is important. But if I'm honest with you, I've seen a lot of people that once their kids enter the real world, that's when we all have to sit down with our kids and go, hey, the world's going to be cruel to you. The world's not going to be kind. And in fact, kindness might put you at a disadvantage in the world. And I've kind of noticed that we say that a lot. This really was traumatized into me several years ago when I read an article about parents. And I think I've mentioned it from the stage here before, but it was that traumatizing that I've thought about it ever since then. They interviewed a bunch of parents and they asked them one question. They asked them, would you rather that your kid be kind or good at school? What's more important to you? And in my mind, I'm thinking, I work with kids, so I hear parents talk to their kids all the time about kindness being important. And I'm thinking, all right, 50-50 at worst, right? Like it's going to be 50-50 at worst. 80% of parents said they'd rather their kids be good at school than be kind. And I was floored by this. Maybe you're sitting there and you're going, I'm not surprised. I was surprised. I was floored by this. And I've never forgotten it. With the way our phones work, we read articles online all the time. And you'd be lucky if you remember, 1 out of 10 of these. We're going on 6 years since I've read this. I've never forgotten it because it scares me. It scares me that we are raising a generation of kids who think how they perform is more important than their kindness to people. So I look at the kindness being listed with all these virtues and I go, it's easy to say that, but I'm not sure the world thinks that way. And if you don't believe me, finish this sentence for me. Nice guys finish last, right? Does anyone say that it's a kind world? No, but I sure hear people say it's a cruel world a lot. I don't know if you've ever heard someone say, that guy, he's too mean for his own good. I don't think I've ever heard that. You know what I have heard? That guy's too nice for his own good. And nice and kind, they're not exactly the same thing. I want to be really, really careful about that. I know the word nice has kind of been used in a lot of situations to kind of keep people in their place and control them and just say, hey, be nice, don't worry about these things that are going wrong. I want to be careful with that. I don't think kind and nice are exactly the same word, but I think they have a lot in common. And I think the more I think about it, the more I am forced to kind of conclude, our world doesn't think kindness is all that great. In fact, we see it as kind of naive, don't we? We think that if our kids go out into the world and they try and be kind to everyone, that they'll be taken advantage of, that their kindness will be broken. We see kindness as oblivious and naive and foolish and short-sighted, and we feel like kindness doesn't really embrace the world as it really is. The kinder someone is, the more likely we are to say that person's in a fantasy world. Kindness is seen as this kind of fake thing that in church and with our littlest kids we say is really important. But with grown-ups and adults and when our kids sure enter this world, that's when we start to say, hey, guess what? That kindness thing doesn't work here. So this question comes up again, how am I being scored? If you look at what Paul's writing, he says kindness is a big deal. But if you look at the world, it kind of looks like kindness isn't. So I started looking into the Bible, into this word kindness. If you don't know, most of the New Testament was written in Greek, so I'm looking at the Greek word for kindness. I knocked the back off that word, and I just look at the word kind a little bit. It's the same way in Greek, where you can just look at the root of that word, see where it comes up, and I look through all the places in the New Testament where this word kind comes up. And I'm looking for clues on someone who's going to tell me what kind is and what kind isn't. Because that's what I think, it's disparaging the way that we talk about it compared to what the Bible's talking about. And I want to see a left and a right, a comparison between the two. So as I looked into this, I found a passage in the Bible where Jesus uses this word kind, and I really wanted to focus in on it. And as I was focusing in on this verse, I realized he talks about what it means to be kind, but before that, he spends 3 verses talking about what it isn't to be kind. I thought that was really, really interesting. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 6 today. We're going to be starting in verse 32. So that's our next verse. I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read 3 verses in a row. It's Jesus talking about what kindness isn't, okay? If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. If I could compare this verse to a 90s pop country song, it would be Shania Twain's classic, That Don't Impress Me Much. All right? So you're good to people who are good to you. That doesn't impress me much. So you're loving to those who love you. That don't impress me much. So you lend to people who can easily pay you back. That don't impress me much. But you know what's interesting? I kind of think that exactly what Jesus says isn't kindness here is how most of us define kindness today. If I were to ask most people here, what are the attributes of a kind person? How would you describe a kind person? Or how can you tell when someone is kind? You might say, well, how do they treat their spouse? How do they treat their kids? How do they treat their parents? How do they treat their loved ones? How do they treat their pets? And truth be told, if I look out my window and I see someone walking down the street kicking their dog all the way down the street, that's probably not a kind person, right? But what Jesus is saying here is that those attributes, the idea of being good to those who are good to you, loving those who love you, lending to those who can pay you back, that's the bottom of the pool. That's the bare minimum. That's where kindness begins. Even the sinners do that. Even the people who don't care to follow God have no trouble paying back people who lend them money or lending to people who can pay them back, have no trouble being good to them and their people. That's the bare minimum. So once again, we have a conflict here. What we think is kindness isn't exactly what Jesus is talking about when it comes to kindness. It doesn't entirely match up. The thing that I think most of us think of when we think of kindness is exactly what Jesus is saying is not that big of a deal here. Jesus isn't impressed by that. And I tried to think about why. Why is it? How can those two things be so different? How can we end up on such completely different pages? And what I settled on is I asked myself, what is Jesus talking about here? What do you call it when you're good to someone who's good to you, when you love someone who loves you, when you lend to somebody who can pay you back? That's not kindness. What that is fairness, right? That's balance, right? And man, does our world love balance. Walk by a painting in a hallway, and if it's crooked, see if you can stop yourself from balancing it. We love balance. We love it when things come out even. We love it when someone's nice to us and we feel the need to be nice to them. Have you ever had the embarrassment of getting someone a Christmas gift and you put thought into it, but maybe not that much, and then they give you something great? Have you ever felt that terror of that moment where it's like, oh goodness, I definitely misunderstood our relationship. I completely missed it. And I felt that a million times where it's like, this person cares about me so much, and I got them a candy bar, you know? Like, they put so much thought into this, and I just went to the gas station and got them a candy bar. And that's like one of my worst nightmares, okay? Our world loves fairness, and we hate unfairness. We despise unfairness. I think this is partially why I think reality TV is so popular. We love seeing a bad guy get what's coming to him. We love seeing our favorites succeed. In sports, if someone wins too much, we get sick of them, and we want to see them lose, because haven't they had enough? Is it fair that Tom Brady wins again? No. No one wants that. We all feel that way. We all feel a sense of imbalance when someone gets too much or when someone's getting too little. Our world loves fairness, and I think that's the problem with this entire thing, because kindness is inherently unfair. Kindness is unfair. Because kindness sometimes involves being nice to someone who doesn't deserve it. Kindness sometimes giving a gift to someone who hasn't really earned it. I know Alex really well, so she's probably not too bothered by this, but in most runs of apples to apples, she would have won that. But there's something not quite in balance because of that. There's something not quite fair about that. And the more we look at kindness, the more we look at being generous and loving and good and welcoming to people who don't deserve it, there's something in our gut that goes, that's just not quite right. In fact, if someone has the good fortune of getting away with being lucky and not like fairly getting the consequences from their action, we all get a little bit angry about that. I remember a long time ago, I had a friend who was in college, and he asked me to pray for him, and I said, yeah, sure, what do you need? And he said, they might be flunking me out of this class. He was in college at the time. And he said, I have to go before the education board and plead my case to not like to not be dropped from this class. And I said, why'd you drop this? Well, like, why are they threatening to do this? And he said, well, I had too many absences. I missed too many classes. And I was really conflicted about this because I was like, how will this person learn to go to class if like I'm praying for them to get away with it, you know? But that's the fairness in me. That really wasn't the kindness in me, was it? You know? So truth be told, I still want him to learn that lesson. I still want him to have those consequences. And I told him that in that moment. But I'll be honest with you. I did pray for him to get away with it because I loved him, because I cared about him. And maybe that was wrong, and maybe that's not the right way to do it. But I share that story with you because I think a lot of times in our lives, we feel the conflict between kindness and justice, don't we? Because kindness is unfair sometimes. And I think that's why when I see it listed with these other virtues, when I see it listed with these other fruit of the Spirit, there's a conflict there. I read it, and even before my eyes are done scanning across the word, my gut goes, really? This one? Kindness? Does it fit with all these other ones? I don't know about that. So I've been struggling with it, and it's been really, really difficult. I've been thinking about it. I've been looking over the Bible verses. I've been trying to study it. This is a terrible Sunday message, by the way, so far, in case you guys are paying attention. My job here today is to tell you that kindness is great, and all I've told you is what a waste of time it is, right? Let's look at some of the things I've said about kindness so far in this message. I've said nothing good about kindness, yeah. Do we have the next slide? Here we go. I mean, it is kind of appropriate. All right, I'll start listing them and we'll see if they come up. Number one, I said that kindness is unfair. That's the thing I just got done talking about. I said that kindness is foolish. Like it's someone, you're kind when you don't know better, right? That's something I've said. I said that sometimes someone can be too kind for their own good. That's how we describe somebody else who should know better. They should know better than to be this nice. I said kindness is for losers. I didn't say that exactly, but how else do you say nice guys finish last? Kindness is for losers. I said that kindness is naive. This is the big one that I think is really, really interesting. Have you ever noticed when someone's especially kind, we treat them like they should know better than to be kind? We like try to talk them out of being nice to people. Has anyone ever done that before? Because I know I have. It's almost as if you should know better. You should do the cruel thing because that's the rules of the world. It's almost as if this kind, naive person doesn't know how they're being scored. And that leads us back to that question all over again. How are we being scored? Because in all honesty, I'm in a round of apples to apples right now, and someone laid down kindness, and I'm not sure what I should be putting down. And I'm really, really confused about that. So that inevitably leads us to this question. And the question is this. If kindness is all of these negative things, why be kind? Why be kind? Do I have a slide? I don't have a slide. I have a slide up here. All right. There's a big slide that says, so, why be kind? Why be kind? That's the question that we're asking here. In a world that says kindness is not going to get you anywhere, why in the world would we choose to be kind? I have the verse here, so I'm going to read it to you. It might not show up on the screen. If it shows up, great. But I'm going to read to you the next verse. The next verse is the first verse where we can really try and find out why to be kind. I have two reasons for you today on why to be kind. And the number one comes from this verse. Now I've lost the verse, so now I can't read it. Oh, thank you. Awesome. I'm going to borrow notes from somebody. All right. Thank you. That was a kind thing to do. All right. Yeah, did you like that? That was pretty good. All right. So I just got done talking about how kindness is useless, how it's a waste of our time. Here comes Jesus with his rebuttal. All right. This is Luke chapter 6, verse 35. Look at that. That's awesome. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. All right, I want to freeze on that real quick. I have the word kind. I finally found it. This was that Greek word I was looking into, and I was drilling down and trying to find in the New Testament. And I finally found it here in this verse. And what's interesting about it is the people he describes that God is being kind to. Is he being kind to the good and righteous? No. Is God being good to the rich and famous? No. Is he being kind to the people who have earned it? No. Who is he being kind to? The ungrateful and the wicked. So ungrateful meaning the person who doesn't know someone who has done something good for them and doesn't appreciate it. It doesn't say thank you. Is there anything worse than someone who doesn't say thank you? That's the person that Jesus loves here. And the wicked. And when I hear the word wicked, I think of the Wizard of Oz. I think of like a vile, awful person and the bad guy in every story, okay? That's what I think of. So who is Jesus kind to? He's kind to the ungrateful and wicked. And this is what's so interesting. Remember what he just got done saying. Don't be good to the good because even sinners do that. That don't impress me much. Don't be kind to the kind. Don't be loving to the loving. Don't lend to those who can pay you back because that don't impress me much. But what does impress God? When we are kind to the ungrateful and wicked. And the reason that I think we can believe Jesus the most in here is because no one has modeled this practice for us more than Jesus. Because let's not forget the ultimate model of kindness we have, and it's sitting right over there in that corner. That while we were still sinners, Paul in another section of another book called Romans writes, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were the ungrateful and wicked, Christ died for us. I think that's so important to remember. Because I got to be honest with you, I'm a little arrogant. I have some problems with that. I'm working through it. Sometimes on my best day, I might think I am worth someone dying for. When I am a really good person and when I am helping others and when I am being generous and when I am being loving and when I am being forgiving, I might be worth something. But you know who is definitely never worth sacrificing for? Me on my worst day. No doubt about it. That person isn't worth anything. Except to Jesus. What Paul says in Romans is, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It'd be easy to write, on your best day, Christ died for you, but he didn't do that. And you know what that means? This is why I think this is so important. I want you all, and this is going to make you feel a little guilty, I want you to think of a huge mistake you made, something you regret in your life. I want you to know, whatever that thing is that you're more ashamed of than anything else, God saw that and said, yep, they're still worth it. I think that's so important. I think that's so important Because we might trick ourselves the way I trick myself and think, you know what, in general, I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm pretty worthwhile. But I'll tell you what, on my worst day, I'm not worthwhile, except in the eyes of Jesus. And I think that's a huge deal. So why is it such a big deal that he says he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked? Because he modeled it for us by dying on the cross for us, by dying for our sins, and then rising 3 days later. Because when he rose 3 days later, he made us all a promise that when we die, we'll rise too. All of that was made possible because he cared more in that instance about kindness than fairness. And I think that's a huge deal. And the other thing I think is interesting about this verse, he not only says that he's kind to the ungrateful and wicked, he wants us to be. Why? Because you will be children of the Most High when you do. What does that mean? Well, if you ever have a friend and that friend has kids and their kid makes a face that just reminds you of one of their parents. Has that ever happened to anyone before? And you go, you're your father's kid, or you're your mother's kid. You see it in them. The way they say something, the way they act, the way they do it. You see something in their face and in their behavior where you're like, oh my gosh, like that's another person. That resemblance is something that a lot of kids come to have a lot of pride in. If they have a positive memory of their parents and someone sees their parents in them, that's something that makes them really, really happy. Well, I want you to think about, that's not a positive emotion for everybody. I want to be really, really clear about that. But the positive notion of that is what Jesus is trying to tap into when he says this. When you are kind to people who don't deserve it, people look at you and they see a little bit of God in you. And they say, you're your God's child. And I think that's something to be really proud of. I think that's something really special. So why does Jesus want us to be kind to the ungrateful and the wicked? Why is kindness important to him? This whole time when I've been telling you about how useless and pointless kindness is, what's reason number one to be kind? Because Jesus was kind to us. And the way that gets driven home is the next verse after this, which is verse 36. Throw that up there for me. Be merciful as your Father is merciful. Be merciful as your Father is merciful. Show mercy the way he shows mercy. That's what makes reason number one to be kind this. Why be kind? Because God was kind to us. Why be kind? Because God was kind to us. Because when we were sinners, when we made mistakes, when we were the ungrateful and the wicked, Jesus looked at that person and said, yep, they're still worth it. And he died on the cross for each and every one of us. That's the first and most important reason that I can think of to be kindness in a world that says it's not important. And the second reason, to talk about the second reason, I need to show you guys a clip from a movie. If you know me at all, you know I'm a crazy movie buff. I watch too many movies, to be honest. But it's something I started on when I was a kid. It's something I kind of use to empathize with people who are different than me. It's a major, beautiful art form that I get a lot out of. And I want to show you what might be my favorite 30 seconds in any movie. It might be my favorite 30 seconds in cinema history. So let's look at this really quick.
Good heavens, man, haven't you any righteous indignation?
Oh, Doctor, years ago, my mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you must be, she always called me Elwood. In this world, Elwood, you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. You may quote me.
So that is from Harvey, an old Jimmy Stewart movie that was a favorite of my mom's and is a favorite of mine. Many years ago, a friend that we met at this church made this for us. My wife had kind of conscripted her to make this and put a lot of work into it to remind me of this moment I love so much. In case you couldn't hear the audio perfect, basically the summary is, in this world, you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. And that quote has always stuck with me, and it's always convicted me. This is sitting in a place right next to the stairs where when I go up the stairs for bed at the end of the day, I see it, and I ask myself, were you kind today or were you smart today? How did you try and get through the world today? Because the implication of this, where it says you have to be oh so smart or oh so pleasant, is the idea that this world can be overwhelming. This world can be frustrating. And you got to have a strategy. You got to be asking yourself how you're scored. And one way to get through it might just be to try and be the smartest. And this word smart, it can be courageous, it can be clever, it can be strong, it can be confident, it can be all these other things. This could be a strategy to get through. Just be a little bit more cunning than the other guys. Just be a little bit smarter than everybody else. That might be one way to get through. But what he's saying there, and what I'm always challenged, is that the other option is to be pleasant. and pleasant can mean kind. And the other strategy to get through a world that is overwhelming and frustrating and upsetting might be kindness. It might be kindness. And that's easier said than done in a lot of ways. Sometimes I look at this and as I'm going upstairs for bed, and I go, you know what, I was smart today, and I'm not sure I regret it. Because I look at the world and it's frustrating and it's upsetting, and I realize in the moment that I have a choice to be cruel or I have a choice to be kind. But when I see the world, I start seeing patterns. And I start seeing that it seems like the cruel get ahead. It seems like the people who are mean are the people who always get the promotions. The people who are willing to cut the throat of their neighbor to make sure their own throats get cut, that those are the people who get ahead. And when I see kind people, sometimes they are taken advantage of. Sometimes little kids get cancer, and sometimes innocent people get in car accidents, and sometimes loving, generous people lose their houses because they're too generous. And sometimes I think about kindness, and I think about how Jesus has challenged me, but all I can ever feel is maybe cruelness is the way. And maybe after the fourth or fifth time I get knocked down, I think this is just the rules of the world. And sometimes I feel like an idiot for thinking that kindness could ever get you through the world, or that there's ever room for niceness, or that kindness is just an opportunity for someone else to slit my throat before I slit theirs. And sometimes it feels that way. And sometimes in those moments I think, well, it's time to just give up. It looks like the rules of the world were cruelness. The dumbest thing I can do is keep trying to be kind in a world that has made it abundantly clear that kindness doesn't work here. Sometimes I think that. I put on a really good face because I work with kids, and it's easy to be happy around kids, and kids are so perceptive about when you're sad and when you're upset. And I do my best, and I know a lot of you guys probably only see me when you drop kids off. And I've been pretty honest up here on the stage about my struggles with depression and about how I just have days where I wake up and I'm sad that I did. And I've gotten help for that, and I continue to get help for that, and I have people who love me, and that's the most important thing that has gotten me through that. But I got to be honest, some days I feel all the things I just described. And I do what I can to get through it, and I do what I can to convince myself that kindness does have a place in this world, but sometimes that's easier said than done. But I got to tell you what I believe about Jesus. A lot of people will tell you that Jesus' plan for our world is that all the people who follow him, one day he's going to rescue us, and he's going to take us all away from this earth, and we're all going to go to heaven, and God's going to throw this rotten old earth in the garbage can. And I like the idea of that because I like the idea of being so overwhelmed that I need someone to rescue me, honestly. I like that idea. But I got to tell you, that's not what I believe the New Testament's telling us. I think God's got a plan for this world. And I think God's plan is heaven and earth merging together and becoming one. And that's screwy, that's weird, it's not what we've learned, it's not what a lot of people believe. I think it's there, but it's not what everyone believes. You don't have to believe that part of it, but here's the reason I think it's important. When we feel the cruelness of the world, and when we see it in its own terrible form, it's easy for us to just say, that's the way the world works, and I just got to get out of here. But when we see this as our home, and when we see something cruel happen, we don't say, let's get out of here. We say, let's get to work. And I like that a lot. I like the idea that from the moment Jesus stepped into this earth, his plan was not just to rescue us from it and destroy it. His plan was to redeem it. We sing a lot of songs about, like, God, bring your kingdom here. But what would be the point of bringing the kingdom here if God's just going to throw it away? I really do believe that God wants the kingdom here because this is the place that he wants to redeem. I think God loves this earth. I think God loves the people in it. I think God believes that there's good in it. And I got to tell you, we're not going to win the world back for him by returning cruelness with cruelness. We're just fighting their game at that point. You can't out-cruel the cruel guys. They got a head start on us. We'll never catch them if we try and play their game. You know how we might stop them? We might stop them by returning their cruelness with kindness. We might stop them by saying, yes, kindness might help make us get taken advantage of, but we're going to do it anyway because God sure loved us knowing we might take advantage of him. That's one of the most important things about the cross, guys. The cross wasn't just a terrible, awful, excruciating, painful way to die. You know what it also was? It was also embarrassing. It was also humiliating. It was also him being beaten and bloodied and spat upon and mocked and dressed in a fake robe and dressed in a fake crown and made to become a parody of the thing he actually was trying to be. People looked at the cross. Do you know why they used the cross as a crucifixion besides the fact that it's incredible and painful? Because if you display somebody up on there, everyone can see it. So you make a person into a billboard of what not to do. You make him into a bloody billboard that says, hey, everybody, don't be like him or you'll end up like that. People walked away from the cross that day and they literally said to each other, well, I guess he's not the Messiah. I guess he's not everything he said he was going to be, because if he was, he wouldn't be dead on a tree right now. And that's the greatest irony of all, guys, because the victory of Jesus Christ is the fact that the thing they were walking away saying is the exact opposite of what was really true. The thing everyone was saying when they walked away, he's not the Messiah, was the very thing that proved that he is the Messiah. The greatest thing about Jesus' victory is that he turned what we see as something that defeats you and breaks you and knocks you down, and he won with it. This is the reason that I believe Christ wants us to use kindness in this world. Not because it's just the nice thing to do, or not because we might be taking advantage of. He wants you to do it knowing you probably will. Because he knows we're not going to win this world back for him by returning cruelness with cruelness. We're not going to win this world back by returning meanness with meanness. We're not going to win this world back by just being good to those who are good to us and loving those who are loving to us and lending to those who can pay us back. He's saying real kindness is something where you have to make a sacrifice. He's saying do it the way I did it. And he's giving us a challenge for that. And the news for that, and the reason that it excites me, and the reason that's a big deal, is because when you choose kindness, knowing the consequences, and knowing it's Jesus' chosen way to fight in this world, then kindness stops being naive, and it starts being strategic and necessary. That's my second reason. The first reason is that we need to be kind because God was kind to us, but the second reason is this, that kindness, despite what the world says, is not naive. It's strategic, and it's necessary. It's planned. It's part of his idea. It's part of his goal to save our world. It's calculated. It's intentional. That's why I think it's so difficult when I hear people say he's just too kind for his own good, as if this poor, stupid person doesn't know what they're doing. And if they knew the world better, then they wouldn't be so kind. That sure isn't the way Jesus lived. And I don't think it's the way he's challenging us to live. Kindness is not naivete. Kindness is not blind and ignorant and optimistic. Kindness is a strategic and necessary choice that, yes, I might be hurt by my own kindness, but that's how Jesus wins. That's how Jesus takes this world back. By loving people who don't deserve it, by forgiving people who maybe haven't even asked they're sorry. And I want to be really clear here, this is not an anti-justice message. I always believe you should stand up for people who are weak, for people who don't have an advocate. I think you should not go back to an abuser. I think if you're in a relationship where someone's hurting you, I'm not saying go back to them and just be kind to them and just act like nothing ever happened. I do think that God cares about justice. I do think he wants the guilty to have consequences, but I also think that no matter how guilty someone is, we still should be extending some kind of kindness to them. And that doesn't mean that there's no consequences. It doesn't mean they don't have to face the consequences of their actions. But I think kindness is the way we win that person back. And I think that because that's my story, guys. My story is of a person who certainly wasn't worth Jesus dying on the cross for. But he loved me when I didn't deserve it. He was good to me when I didn't earn it. He lent to me when I couldn't possibly pay him back. And his story is our story. His win is our win. And my challenge for each and every one of us this week is just to go out and be kind. Be kind without expecting anything back. Be kind without thinking that it's ever going to necessarily come good. And every time you get disappointed, every time you think kindness is useless, and every time that you think kindness isn't getting you anywhere, remember that this is how God fights. He fights with kindness. And I challenge you guys to fight the same way, to grit your teeth and find a way to be kind. We're going to close today with kind of a led prayer. I'm going to pray something, and you guys are going to pray back to me. This is kind of what we do here every week. If you've never made the choice to follow Jesus, if you've never accepted that story I told about how Jesus died on the cross for you and died for you at your very worst, this is your opportunity to do that. I'm going to pray in a way where if that's your first decision, you can pray it and make that decision for yourselves. But everyone in this room is going to pray. So if you're feeling self-conscious about praying it back, no one will hear you. Everyone's going to pray this because we all need a refresher on this. So I would encourage you guys to pray after me and just kind of repeat after me, and we're going to pray about being kind, and we're going to pray out of thankfulness, and we're going to pray to make a decision to follow Jesus. Dear Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for forgiving us. Thank you for being kind even when we made mistakes. You died on the cross because you loved us. You died on the cross because you weren't satisfied to let this relationship stay broken. You loved us too much to let us go. Let us be kind to others the way you were kind to us. When we can choose cruelness or kindness, let's remember how we're being scored. Let's remember that you value kindness. I love you, Lord. I choose to follow you. And I choose to show the world your kindness. In your name.